This is the first time I'm beta testing a new program to stream to you, which I hope on the whole is going to provide a much richer experience for you to be able to engage and ask questions. So I just need to take a moment to check the stream. It looks like on Facebook Live we're there, so that's fantastic. Just going to send everyone a quick welcome. And nice. So excellent, guys. I'm just checking some different socials, and then I will be right with you. So bear with me. Hi, everyone. Great having you join. We have a really absolutely fantastic session lined up today. I'm really excited to share with you some of the great questions that people have had and have been asking. And yes, I'm live. So several people are on LinkedIn and may not have a Facebook, so I've now made it possible for you to join as well. And I have also made it possible for people to join from YouTube. I know some people are at work, and work doesn't want you or might even block your Facebook. So I've done this to make things as interactive as possible. Now, some of my comments appear like they may not post to some of the socials. So there might be a couple hiccups. I'll see everything that you post, but I may not be able. It looks like some of the chat may not post back to you in the Facebook group. So I'm going to keep an eye on that. And if you guys have any glitches, let me know, and I'll do my best to troubleshoot. So just giving people a couple minutes to jump on while I continue to set up the stream. Okay. So let's see. Great. Close. Let's say 1 second. So let's see. Great. Okay. Let's say. Excellent. Okay, guys, let's go ahead and get started. I'm tremendously excited today to test out this new format and template with you. I'm hoping to make it more interactive than ever before. And this week, we've canvassed a lot of great questions coming from you. And really, this is your time to get your questions answered, to get unfiltered, raw advice from me, because I've been there, seen it all, and made just about every mistake you can possibly think of making. We've got a lot of new members in the group, so a special welcome goes to you. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Professor David Stuckler. And, my story is I started off at a small school in Texas. I actually never finished high school. I started college and flunked out a semester and had so many bumps along the way. And it was only through really getting proper support and mentorship where a professor reached out to me, took me under his wing, and helped me to publish my first paper that things took off. And I was able to get into Yale for grad school, go on to do a PhD at Cambridge University, and eventually get on the tenure track at Harvard University and become a full professor at Oxford by the time I was 30. And, what I've learned from this process is that there are a series of common mistakes that grads make, even the brightest ones, common pitfalls they fall into that cause a world of frustration, pain, suffering, and can lead to a burnout. 1 in 3 PhD students don't finish, really losing out on the big investment they're making. And there, with a few right steps, taking the right steps to prepare yourself, you can get yourself on the fast track to your success. And so that's what this session is for. I want to create this open access democratic community that people all over the world can get the support that I've given my students at Harvard and Oxford, that's propelled their careers to where they're now full professors in other universities. Some open up their research team, high flying jobs in top companies around the world. And I want to make that access available to you. And really, when you work in a very intimate, intense way, you can go really far together. And in fact, I've got one of my students, Mohammed, who I'm incredibly proud of here, who's jumped on the call with us. Mohammed, I'm just going to bring you on because I'm so proud of your results. Mohammed hadn't fully gone through this process before. He joined our fall batch of students, and within just a few short weeks, has come up with a winning topic and an idea that's going to publish very soon. Just got his study registered by Prospero, and within a matter of just a couple weeks, in less than a month, going through the mini course that even you guys have access to in the Facebook group, 100% free. Mohammed's ready to publish. Mohammed, let me just pull you on for a second. Would you be willing to just share, just like very quickly, what your experience has been so far?
Yes. So precisely, I think today is my third week on the Fast Track Plus group, and like you said, I've been able to register my systematic review with Prospero. And also, I don't want to take too much credit for this, because actually this is what the program is. This was what sold me to the program, which is the promise of publishing high quality articles and at a very, very fast pace. Being an MSc student, I know how long it takes to get your methods, to even get the idea of a winning topic. I know how long it takes, but for me to be able to do it within just 3 weeks, I think it's amazing, and I have you to thank for it. And like I said, I don't want to take too much credit. It's actually a simplified process. I had a roadmap session with you, which outlined my research interest and my future interest. From there, we were able to iron out a winning topic, which I think both of us were passionate about, a topic that was topical. It was a huge debate, and also it was feasible. So and then I just followed the Kajabi course. I'm not sure all of us are familiar with it, but for people in the Fast Track Plus, we're aware there is a course, the Kajabi course, and that was what I followed on the systematic review. And here I am today, looking to get published probably within a month's time or so. Okay.
Yeah. No, Mohammed, look, thanks for sharing it. And thanks for volunteering to do this. I wasn't expecting to pull you on today. But I'm just really proud of the results. And you have been willing to work very hard. And I mean, you've just been flying and absorbing the material that we lay out step by step like a sponge. And, Prospero is a win because they won't register it if that's not going to go on to get published. And it's great because you're really going to plant a flag, make a name for yourself in this, and it's opening up this fruitful research agenda where you can see kind of step by step where the progression is to help you do the things you have to do to get on the fast track. So, Mohammed, I'm gonna close this back. Thanks for sharing again, and I'm gonna turn straight to our questions that came from the group. So what I've got here, the first question I want to cover came from Ali Aronson on Instagram, actually. And the question was, what do I need to do to prepare for a PhD interview? Now, that is a fantastic question. And it's one that, our students just don't get enough preparation for. Often you're just kind of thrown in, you're expected to figure it out. And what you really need are some basic principles to kind of help guide you and make sense of the things that you need to do to be really effective and stand out in this interview. And I remember when I was on the interview panels at Oxford and Cambridge, which they do interviews for undergraduates, but I could really see a difference in the students who had gotten preparation from elite prep schools, who came in those interviews and they knew what was going to happen. They knew what to do. And it just took some anxiety and some fear because they had done mock interviews. They had prepared. And that gave them a huge advantage, even having the same knowledge as an ability as other students are coming. And I had some other students who were in that setting for the first time in a setting that might have been really uncomfortable, trembling, and they weren't able to really show the admissions committee just how good they were. So I want you to be able to really show off how good you are, and this is not a time to hold back. You need an appropriate level of modestness. You definitely don't want to overstep what you're capable of, but you do want to show your ability. So the first thing to know on a PhD interview, you need to differentiate, importantly, who is funding this PhD. So some PhD positions are directly funded by a professor's grant. So for example, I have research grants. There are certain PhD students who I know, those are my PhD students. Those are my lines. Ultimately, right, that cliche, the buck stops here. Yeah, that in that case, the buck stops with me. I'm making the decision. So if you're going to that kind of a PhD interview, there is one person you need to convince more than anybody that's make or break. And in those cases, especially, I've had PhD students come into a department who would not have gotten in. This happened at Oxford. I probably shouldn't say this live, but got in to Oxford, got rejected. I said, hang on, wait a second. I've got funding. I want that student. I want that student in. And, and that was enough. That got the student in. And so, it's really important, and I say this again because that can really make a huge difference in your prospects. So if you're preparing for that kind of interview, you need to kind of stalk that professor. Now, I'm not saying write them he or she a million messages. You need to know, what's the position about? If you can get it, what grant is funding it? What kind of research have they been publishing? Who's in their research team? What kind of papers are they publishing? Sometimes if you don't want to be so overt and actually get in touch with a professor in advance of your interview, maybe now get the interview on the table, it's too late for that. You can certainly get in touch with members of their lab and try to feel things out. And that's something generally you want to do anyway, because you want to know what kind of environment you're going to be stepping into for your PhD. And I have many students who come to me and they're in a toxic lab with a professor who doesn't give them any support. And if they had just done their due diligence, just done their homework beforehand, they could have avoided themselves a world of pain, frustration, and just unnecessary misery. So I want to make sure you guys do not make that mistake and are prepared. When you prepare then with that professor, so now you got the information of the professor, their goals, their interests, what they're currently live and working on, and how you fit into their goals. You remember, you need to make this interview about them, about how you can help them. And that's really the case, because they're hiring somebody like it's a job. They are looking for a person because they have their goals to meet. And thanks for this good question just coming in. I'm going to come to that question in just a second. So this is a different kettle of fish when you're dealing with a program where you need to find one person who's funding you. The second type is a more general open admissions category. And there you might have a committee involved. You might have 2 or 3 professors who are tasked with being the committee, who are making the decisions for the whole department. One thing that they're going to crucially be looking for is a good fit. Is a very good fit. So the PhD programs that do interviews are different from other ones. The ones that don't do interviews often might have passed with a lot of students going in and having grades, and they know some people might flunk out or not pass, and they're not that heavily invested in you as a PhD student from the outside. The ones who are doing interviews, they're often going to spend that extra time and investment because they're investing a lot in you too, and they might be expecting things out of you. So they're going to be really looking for, are you the right fit? Do you know what you're getting yourself into? And again, you have to almost think of this like a job application, like you're going to be an employee for them. Some people tell me, oh yeah, a PhD is great. I want to do a PhD because it makes some money. It's like, well, yeah, you're essentially in some cases doing a very low paid apprenticeship job that when the math was done, you end up with under $2 an hour on average, which is not really a fantastic reason to do a PhD. But really, you want to make the case to that kind of committee and the open PhD interview that you are the right fit for that program. You know you want to be there. And one of the ways you can do that is a gentle flatter. So a lot of the same principles with the individual faculty apply, except now you want to try to find out who's on the committee, what are their passions and interests, and really show that you're doing something that fits right in the wheelhouse, right in the remit of that department. So if you know that department, for example, is really big on making a case for gender equality, and your research is kind of out in left field, and you're interested in studying, I don't know, inequality in primates or something, that's completely off base, right? They're going to be scratching their head wondering how this is a fit. Because think about it from their perspective for a second. They want to know they're investing people who are going to finish, who can get in a good relationship with faculty and contribute to the department. And they definitely don't want problem students who aren't going to do well. And they want students at the end of the day who are going to place well in the job market, who are going to go on and get good jobs, because that's going to make their department look good. And ultimately, the department's uh, success is going to depend on it. So you really want to do what you can well in advance of this interview to make some connections with the faculty. And I have a whole series on mentors and connecting to mentors with a strategy called vesting interest, of how to get top people in your field invested in you. And ideally, you would already have that lined up going into your interview. The other thing you want to make sure you know going into the interview, you might have 2 or 3 points that you really want to convey. And those 2 or 3 points you probably foreshadow already in your cover letter and things your rec letter writers have said. So, for example, you'll know your stand on things. Maybe you know, it's always nice to show rather than tell. So maybe you've published a paper already. What's your big selling point to them? If you can, you want to make sure that that gets in there. This is your chance to shine and show that you're qualified, that you can do it, and you know what you're getting yourself into. So before you go in, write down 2 or 3 bullet points that'll help you stay on track and focus for them. Common questions you get asked do vary. They may try to throw you and ask you some tests about your knowledge of the field. I know for me, one thing that I really like to ask people when I would interview them is, I would have them design a study from scratch on a topic they're interested in, and that would tell me a lot. Do they have a topic they're interested in, or at least some idea about research? They thought this through. And do they have some basic rudimentary tools to think about research, think about that topic in a real way that's feasible and important? So there might be some field specific things, and the way to get at those field specific things is to know that the interview they're going to do with you is going to highly correlate with the interview they did last year and with former students. See if you can chase down some of those former students and get some insight on what that's about. And you'd be amazed. I mean, few people actually reach out and flatter current students in a place. Those students will be willing to share and willing to talk to you, more likely than not. You have nothing to lose by contacting the students. So these are just a few of the steps. I could go on more on how you can best prepare for the PhD, but a lot of the things that you'll see in the applying for the PhD masterclass that we have in the Facebook group, those are exactly going to be the things. If you've done those steps leading up to your application, those are going to be all the things that you need to do anyway to prepare if you have an interview, and really to start your PhD on the right track. And that's why often I say your PhD starts even before you've sent the application. I know it's a strange way to think about it, but it's the way I encourage all the people I work with to think about it from the outset. So I just want to take this follow-up question here. We had this great one. What's the criteria to determine whether a PhD program is right for you? So I imagine by this point you've established that you want to do a PhD, that you definitely, that's the path you want to go down. It's important to you. It's going to help you get to your career goals down the track. And you're really highly motivated, and you know something about the field. Maybe you've had an appetizer research, that, this gives you oxygen and wind in your sails. And it's not, you're not doing it for the wrong reasons, like you didn't know what to do, or, oh, I get paid $2 an hour for this. That you're doing it for the right reasons. So that's good. Then you need to know if it's the right fit. And fit is incredibly important. Too often I see students just going to the top institution, and you'll actually see in the Matthew Effect video I did on how to get an unfair advantage as a graduate student, some hard data on just how important the mentor relationship is with who you work with in grad school. You have to think of PhD as like an apprentice system. That the way you move into the field is very much the way like a carpenter would pass on the craft to the next generation. And you need somebody who's going to pass on that craft to you. You need somebody who's gonna teach you the things you need to know in order to be incredibly successful and get to the top of your field. So that's going to be more important than the program itself. Is going to be some certain individuals. Now, those individuals may change down the track, but I encourage you to think before program I encourage you to think of the individuals, then think of the program, and then think about what you feel like your areas for development are in the PhD. Is that you need some base skills, so maybe you need a program that does have a heavy installment of coursework and core training in a specific area that you want to develop specialized expertise in. Maybe it is that you have some geographic constraints, and that's reasonable. You have some geographic or family constraints, and that's right for you. Some people like a PhD by publication because that gives them the ultimate flexibility. So those are just a few. You want to know. Sometimes I see a lot of students getting lost in decision making, and one of the having studied some cognitive psychology, is people don't do well making decisions under uncertainty. And PhD program is a huge decision under uncertainty. And so the best way to manage all this complexity and uncertainty is to think for you the 2 or 3 dimensions that are most important in a PhD program to you, and optimize those dimensions and make a decision based on those. So pick your 2 or 3 dimensions, write those down, and make a decision. And again, I would put at the top of that list one dimension of, do you have a supportive mentor at that institution in place who's willing to work with you and you believe you can have a good relationship with? I would put that at the very top, and to me, that almost trumps every other consideration. I mean, I would pick a supportive mentor like that over higher ranked university. It is that fundamental. So I hope that helps, and do pop in the comments any situations there. Actually, we're getting a lot of really good questions on the PhD. We got another one coming up. I think we might want to do another session just dedicated on the PhD, because I'm seeing so many good questions coming through here. So thank you for that. These are definitely tricky, delicate situations. So I'll take this last one on the PhD, and then I want to go through a question that came from Amy about organizing a massive literature. So this last one on the PhD: how should a candidate handle a situation of already accepting a PhD admission in a university and then receive an offer from the dream university? This is a tricky one. This is a really, really tricky one. It's the same as a job offer, actually. So you take a job offer, and then suddenly this other one comes along. You are going to end up giving a black eye if you leave your one university for the other. You're going to give one a black eye and really burn a bridge there. This is tough. I don't want you to fall into the temptation that the grass is greener in the other institution. I want to make sure there wasn't some important reason for delay from your dream university in accepting you in the first place, because sometimes it's even like relationships. I see people who sometimes are in a relationship, and then they see some other attractive young thing walking along and think, oh, wouldn't that be amazing, that would be so great, and then they drop this great thing they have, get into that, and it's actually a mess. So I really like it when you're in a department that wants you, that is going to invest in you. And I would take a department like that over a higher ranked one, because that's going to matter more for your future. That said, if you just vastly believe you're in a situation, you're convinced that this other institution is totally superior in all regards, especially those 2-3 dimensions you want to optimize. If you're convinced by that, then I think you politely say, because you haven't started the other university, that I'm very, very sorry. There's delays in receiving this offer from the other university. I didn't think it was going to come through, and I have to very politely bow out and start the other program. But I would not end up risk getting in a situation where you accept the other university, some paperwork or something slips through, and then you can't actually do it. It's happened to some students. They drop one, expecting the other one to come along. The other one fumbles the ball, and then the student ends up with nothing. So just make sure you've really, really, really locked down the offer from that dream university, and know you're burning a bridge at the old one. And try to apologize profusely as much as you can, because it could already be you've taken a spot from somebody, and it's a bit sour grapes for that person who didn't get a spot. Okay, thanks. Great questions, guys. So I want to come to Amy, because she really expressed a challenge that I think a lot of students really face and struggle with. And That is trying to keep this massive literature. As you're doing a PhD or any big research project, I remember when I was writing my first book, you've got hundreds and thousands of references, and it feels like your virtual office is exploding with like paper filled everywhere, virtual paper. And you just feel like you're drowning and you can't keep track. And then when you need something, it's hard to string your ideas together. And you can stay on top of things. It can be kind of stressful. So what I think you need to do here is really get to know well your reference manager. And we got a great training on Zotero and how to use it to your advantage. And I like Zotero because it's 100% free and open access. And it's like the way R is free and open access for data sciences. Zotero is the equivalent for your reference manager, and use it effectively. And one thing that all my students know to do is to start categorizing their references into different buckets, and that's going to help you. That's going to help you. You have your master library, and you have a subcategory. Like maybe this is my library on theory. This is my library on methods. And sometimes if you get lost, you can't remember an article. That's one way to find it. The other thing is when you're actually writing things up, and maybe you're using the strip method I talk about, and you doing literature reviews, that you want to go through and make sure that you at least put the name of the author next to each point that you're threading into your document. So at least you have that point of reference. Say, that's where that was the genesis of that idea. That's the citation I can reference back to. Just those two simple things: organizing your literature on one side and making sure you have some trigger keywords or things in your document so you can manage where things were. Those two things together will help you create some order to the seeming chaos and feel like you're drowning in just a sea of articles that you can't keep up with. I know some students go even further and they organize literature chapter by chapter. They have a different reference library for each chapter. That can be okay too. But you need to create one of these systems in place to help you have a feeling of control and not feel overwhelmed. So the other thing I want to point out on that I find especially helps me feel on track with the literature is by taking the article step by step instead of trying to sometimes write everything at once, which I see some students do, or maybe progress from the introduction to the methods and go in a linear way, is to write from the inside out. And it's much easier to keep track of your methods if, starting with the methods is one of the main things you've done first, or maybe your theory section is one thing that you might do first. To have, that kind of creates a natural self-containment of your references and deploying those references as you write up those sections, and feels very natural. It's our simple writing methods to feel very natural and easy because it feels natural because you're writing up as you go along and complete those various steps. It's just so much simpler, so much easier, and it feels like you're making progress, which you are, rather than come back to it and you've kind of forgot things you did 6 months ago. So those two steps, I believe, are really gonna help you create a sense of order in the document and your notes that tie back to your references, and on your reference manager side, make sure you're organizing your literature into relevant buckets and try to create a sense of order and structure to the way you're proceeding in your writing. So I hope that helps. Then I believe we had Brian come to us with a really nice question that I want to cover for a second, and that is that Brian was sharing with us that he really was struggling with outlines. And look, first, Brian, Brian. Let me see. I just don't want to mispronounce your name here. Brian Hansen. Thank you, Brian. First, fantastic that you're even doing an outline. Look, so many students I know, bright students, don't even start with the outline, and they just kind of jump in and write, and that can be very good. There's a time and a place to just vomit on a page, especially if you're stuck writing. Get your ideas down and all their messiness, but you're still going to need to pull back the threads and put them into an outline. Now, what I see students make a mistake with in their outline is that they sometimes write an outline and they're like, well, I can't write a paper from now. Now I'm going to try to write my paper, and this outline isn't helping me. I can't seem to follow my own outline. What's wrong with me? I'm supposed to do the outline, and it's not helping me. And that's very frustrating. And that's because you're actually not doing the outline in the right way, because what your outline needs to be is something called right. An outline is very basic. It's a series of outline. You might have A, B, C, D, and maybe those A, B, C, Ds correspond to your paragraphs. Maybe they correspond to big chunks of ideas you want to flesh out, and then maybe your subheadings correspond to paragraphs. But I really like for academic writing to make my outline, maybe have an outline for my introduction, say, that then has A, B, C, D, E, or so forth. And those A, B, C, D, E are paragraphs. And we have a rule that each paragraph makes 1 point. And that 1 point rule is followed by something else, that 1 point is something called a topic sentence. And that topic sentence is basically the main point of the paragraph. So if you do that right in your outline, and so your outline, the points in your outline are your topic sentences, which are effectively the first sentence of your paragraph, your outline is going to work. And you'll see this in good writing. It's an exercise I take my students through, where you actually look through good articles. Look through good articles. Look at the first sentence, and you can tell the story that the author is telling. Cover up their other sentences. Just read the first sentence and go through it. That's where you know that article is well written, has clear topic sentences. Each paragraph is making 1 point, and it's kind of like putting the reader in the car and driving them in the right direction. And a lot of writing feels confused, and you feel lost when that doesn't come together. So make sure, for your writing to be linear and efficient, that you're putting together strong topic sentences, every paragraph making 1 point, and that is in your outline, if that makes sense. And Brian, I hope this helps answer your question. Do pop into the chat if that didn't answer your question, or you want any potential clarity on that. Joey, same to you. Thank you. You really had a great question there. So want to make sure that I've really covered that thoroughly for you. Jordan, fantastic to see you join us. Really glad to have you with us. Those are some of the main elements in your writing that you want to go through, and just kind of belabor that point a little bit. I just had somebody send me a message that they want to see that. I'm going to share my screen for a second. I'll just show you. Let's go to a recent journal, and let me show you an example of what I mean there, by topic sentences. So I'm going to start sharing. I think it's going to be screen. I have multiple screens open, so I just got to get to the right one. Here we go. Let's go to screen 3. Okay. So now we're sharing the screen. Okay. So here's my browser. So let's go. I particularly like, as my students know, I particularly like The Lancet for good writing. Let's go to a recent paper that's on a topic that's going to be relatively accessible to everyone. And The Lancet has fantastic in-house editors. By the way, my love for The Lancet, I'm in no way biased, having published there a lot, but also here, epistemic injustice in academic global health. This sounds like a nice one. That's a viewpoint. Let's see how they've structured it. Cool. So this looks like a nice one. Okay, we'll go through this. Let me see if I can create a little more space on the page. Okay, so you can see a little bit better. Can you guys see this, or do I need to? Let me see if I can zoom this a little more. Whoops. Okay, I see that on the screen, and the way I'm sharing this is cutting off a little bit. Let me try to tweak this further. If I can picture in picture, yeah, it's still a little hard for you to see, I think. Send me in the text if you're having some trouble actually seeing this. And meanwhile, I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit, and see if that makes things clearer. Okay, so yes, and if you haven't seen it already, we did this fantastic interview with the executive editor of The Lancet, Jocelyn Clark, where she gave her best tips about how to avoid the main mistakes she's seen in over a decade of working at top medical journals that people make when they submit papers. Okay, so the first sentence is going to tell you what the paragraph is about, if it's written well. Here, for example, is topic sense. In our view, this injustice framework can help make sense of unfair practices. That's your topic sentence, and that's really key. And everything in the rest of the paragraph is going to be points, examples, or explaining things that reinforce that point. All right. The first systematic theory was proposed by this lady, and then keeps going to explain how she introduced it and did some fun things. And so this is this is really what you're going to see. If it's really well written, you'll be able to follow the paper just from this. So let's see if we can do it with this paper. Some social groups find that academic global health is geared towards their interest, where others find less priority is placed on what they know, how they see the world, or what is of pronounced consequences to them. In our view, the epistemic injustice framework can help in efforts to surface make sense of potentially unfair knowledge. Yeah, so this is okay. This is not, I have to say, this is actually not fantastic. I'm going to switch it and see if I can find one in a research article. Let's see if we can find, for example, here's a different one. So it's okay. Again, this is a hallmark of good writing, and one thing you'll find when you really evaluate writing is they don't always do that great a job. Let's take a look at this one here. So in most countries worldwide, the prevalence of tobacco smoking among people in custody is high, and then it has some examples backing up that point. Okay, and then smoke-free policies have resulted in substantial reductions. Good, and then some points about the debate, and then linking to the next. And then you have, although several jurisdictions worldwide have introduced smoke-free policies, little evidence is available. So this is great. This introduction is a very nice example of the topic sentences can tell the story. So in most countries worldwide, right, we have high smoking of people who are in prisons. Smoke-free policies in public places have helped, but we don't know, right, what that does in it has really helped with the general population. And then the third one is, say, although some people have started to introduce smoke-free prison policies, we don't really know, how much that's done to make a difference. And so just as topic paragraphs without reading the different evidence that backs up those points, you can see this reads much more nicely. And I hope you guys can even see this. When you read this compared to the previous paper, this paper is easier to read. This paper is it has a flow. It's easier to follow. Papers both published in good journals with different degrees of editing. Okay, Lancet Global Health. I said the Lancet. So it's the Lancet. The Lancet has subjournals. The Lancet itself invests more in copy editors to get these things right. So you'll actually find, I want you to pay careful attention to papers you find easy to read. That if you find a paper easy to read and is well written, I want you to remember that and start thinking about why. And the way you improve is to imitate. Try to imitate that good writing and start getting yourself in the habit of writing better, of practicing it, training it like you would train any exercise or muscle. Like I've often told my students, for many years, when I moved to England from the U.S. For grad school, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen here. When I moved to the U.S. from England to go to grad school, I didn't. It rained a lot, so I couldn't play tennis anymore because it was just always kind of terrible out. And so what I had to do effectively was switch to squash, and because it was an indoor sport. But I had never taken a lesson in squash, and so I just played a lot, and I was terrible. I was just awful at it. And it was only when I first got a lesson and started to get some proper training in squash that I actually had a framework in which I could begin to improve. And that turned out to be hugely important, and started taking my writing to the next level. But so often I just kind of wallowed around in misery and was making no progress and wasn't getting any good. But getting that writing that initial training in writing was a game changer. So if you're interested in some more trainings on that, reach out to me in the DMs. Let me know, and I'll link you up with some trainings that have really helped my students, and I'm confident would help you guys as well. So, any last questions? We have some people here who are live on the call with me. I want to also open up to you. I know Mohammed, I see Susan and Rehab, you're here. We've got some more questions here. We got another one. Fundamental differences. Aditya, thank you for your question. I'm not sure why we just get this generic Facebook user here. Again, I'm beta testing this new system, but I do like how easy it is to start bringing the comments on screen. Okay, let's come back then. Fundamental differences between grad school in the US and UK. Well, one of the biggest differences is a timeline, and that timeline differs because of a few things. So one is that the UK, you often get into a PhD, you don't have coursework anymore. Often in the UK, you don't have mandated research assistantships. You just work on your own research. Often that means it can be shorter. So the US instead, you often have 2 years of coursework, and then you progress on. You often get your hand held a lot more. You often have a big PhD committee of people who are involved. And you often have some required research assistantship, teaching assistantship, and those programs take often 5, 6 years more. Uh, Now, a lot of the US students are used to having their hands held and being taken through a program, and they find the UK system very difficult. And it's not everybody, but at risk of generalization. Some of the UK students get frustrated by having to have a lot of coursework that they feel like is not relevant and being forced to do things that are not propelling them forward. I personally think that the UK PhD can be extremely effective and efficient, but you really need a good supervisor. Actually, that applies anywhere, but especially in the UK because you often don't have a big PhD committee. It's often really down to just one individual. In the US, there's a risk if you don't have somebody who's really looking after you that you just slip through the cracks between a committee and nobody takes real responsibility for you. So it's really an important calculus for you. If you feel like you want more coursework and core training, and you're not confident you can get that on your own, then I would go to grad school in the US. If you already have a great supervisor lined up and you really feel like you can fly and you want in the same 6 years to say do a PhD and then a postdoc, the UK is a much more efficient track. You'll get done faster. But you really need to, especially if you want to go to the US for jobs, you need to make sure you publish a lot to stay competitive. Because sometimes the competitive ethos I don't find in the UK universities, the US students know they often regard their PhD in the US as the worst time in their life. They're known for living in the basement, eating Snickers and drinking, Cokes from vending machines with like, no windows, and it's like a prison. Where the UK students often have a much nicer time. But the problem is they're not as competitive on the US job market. And that's not because they haven't gotten the training. It's just they haven't simply put in the hours like the US students do. So, I was told when I went to the UK that it was pretty unorthodox and it would be very hard for me to come back in the US job market. And that really lit a fire for me to really lit a fire to me to make sure I published and kept up with what the top graduate students were doing on the job market in the US. And I was also acutely aware. I set benchmarks. I saw what the market was, the assistant professor jobs I wanted. I saw what the profile of those successful candidates looked like. So I had a benchmark. I knew what I needed to achieve to get on the fast track. And again, something we do with all our students, we set those benchmarks, we set those goals. So you know what you need to achieve. And that's one of the great things, is one of the good and the bad things about the academic sector is that the goalposts are kind of clear. It's kind of meritocratic that if compared with other jobs where there's more cronyism. Not to say that there isn't cronyism in the university, there definitely is. But that if you do the right things, you will succeed. Like you will, if you play by the rules, which are to publish, start bringing in funding, you'll get a good job. You will do well. You'll have a choice in the job market. It's just some students aren't really prepared or even know the steps or haven't really gone in depth to study it to get those advantages and do the things they need to do to get in that position. So that's what this group is for. I want to help all of you to do your very best and meet your goals. So hope that Aditya, hope that helps. Susan asked a question privately in our chat here. I like the writing examples. Fantastic. I'd love to hear that. How can we use good examples from journals to improve our writing? Well, one thing, and let me see in this private chat. I don't think I can show the private chat on the screen. Okay. So one thing that and I'm really glad you asked that. One thing that I encourage all students to do, especially when you're working on a paper, is to know what your nearest neighbor paper is. What is the closest paper to yours? And see if that's a well-written paper. And if that's a well-written paper, that's going to give you some guides for style. If it's not a well-written paper, try to find something else that's close to your topic or in your field that you think is well-written. Now, to understand why something's well-written, this is kind of like saying, okay, suppose I know nothing about how to make steak, but I can tell when a steak is tasty. Well, I'm not going to learn what makes a good steak or even how to make a good steak myself just by eating a lot of steak, even though I'm from Texas. I love steak and could eat a lot of steak, but it's not going to make you a good cook. You need to take this thing that you can appreciate is beautiful, and you need to have a framework and a set of basic tools to unpack why it's good. Right? So a good chef will know, right, the steak was cooked at the right temperature, has an even distribution of heat. Maybe it had the Maillard reaction to give it a fantastic sear, to lock in flavors. Maybe, right, it was seasoned with salt at the right moment after cooking, something the Italians like to do. You're going to get me on a complete digression about how Italians like to cook their steak. From the point of view of a Texan, fascinating talk for another time. But you need to have a framework to be able to interpret what is good writing so that you can apply it to your own. And that's one of the things that we actually teach with the elements and design lectures. I don't really teach a lot of grammar. You can get that elsewhere. Just hire a copy editor. I try to teach style. And the style is really you being able to, writing is the art of you communicating your ideas and thoughts in a way that others can comprehend. And often your flow of thoughts or the way things are jumbled up in your mind now that makes sense to you, you can't just literally transpose and copy and paste and expect somebody else to make sense out of that. So that's what the process of writing is really translating those thoughts into accessible components for other people. And when you get that right, you'll have much better results in everything you do. You'll have better engagement with your supervisors, because oftentimes supervisors can't, like, this is a mess. I can't even understand what the student is doing. This is going to land in the too difficult pile and just can't be bothered with it. You'll get better results from just feeling good when you talk to people about your topic, that they respond and engage and they suddenly get why what you're doing is so important to you. Where I remember before, nobody seemed to understand what I was doing, and I felt like I was lonely and isolated, and like, nobody gets why this is important, but I see it's so incredibly important. And it really was, I couldn't communicate it very effectively, and if I couldn't even do that, was hopeless at being able to write it in an effective way. So thanks for that, Susan. This really good question about how to use it, but you really need to get the tools and framework to digest what makes good writing. Like we've covered today, we won't be able to cover all those elements, but one of those good elements is a clear topic sentence. And those of my students know that that's like they're going to have nightmares hearing about topic sentences, because it's so important. It's like it's this glue that holds together your outline and the content of your paper together in delivering your message. Okay. Any other questions? I'm just going to check the other platforms to make sure that I haven't missed out on things people are potentially asking. Here on LinkedIn. Okay. Good. Fantastic. Okay, guys, I think this is if we don't have any other really burning questions in the group, I know there's a little bit of a lag sometimes in the stream. I think that's a good point to break. And, we just want to send a big thanks to Amy and Brian for sharing their questions with us today. And we'll be able to pick this up in our next session. Aditya, key to writing an effective PhD proposal. That is a fantastic question. I think I'm going to run out of time. That's a big one. I think I'm going to run out of time to answer that one. But that is a fantastic topic I'd like to cover more for you coming up. So let me be in touch with you in the DMs and share with you some things that have helped my students on PhD proposals. And I want to take that because a lot of people now are going into the season of applying for PhDs, applying for postdocs, applying for jobs. And we have a lot of rich resources and training on those applications. And a lot of things that you need to do to apply for a job, go in the job market, are the same things that you need to do if you really want to do well applying for the PhD. And just because you've gotten into a PhD doesn't mean that you might have done it in a way that was the best way or optimal way. And so it's always good to refresh and make sure you're doing those right things for the job market as well. My students have had great results in the job market. I've got a couple who are full professors at Oxford, one at LSE, another in the US at Berkeley, several on the East Coast, and so forth. So do know a thing or two about helping to prepare effective job market applications, and I want to share that knowledge with you. And we will probably do a dedicated session just on that. Just on that. But the one thing I just want to leave you with on the PhD proposal for now is, again, make sure that PhD proposal intersects with a faculty interests that you're applying to, and we'll speak to somebody like that, because you want them, when they look at your application, to say, yeah, what a teacher wants to do is like, I love this. I would love to work with him on this. This really fits. So that's going to be really critical. Armando, great for joining. We're just signing off for this time. But catch up. You guys will always, if you're on Team Replay watching this, let us know in the comments. I know the vast majority of you watch later on your own time, because we are across multiple time zones. And I think that's a wrap for today. I will look forward to seeing you guys next Friday at our usual time. As ever, send your questions in advance. The more advance notice you give me, the more I can prepare a training that's going to be right for you. And a special thanks, Mohammed. Again, Mohammed, thank you for sharing your story with us. It was great to have you join today, and just kind of give those raw impressions of what you've been able to achieve in such a short period of time. And by the way, let me know, some of you guys, what you think about this format compared to the past formats that we've done. I'm still going to beta test this new system a couple weeks to be more interactive and reach a wider audience of some people who aren't able to join Facebook from work where they are. Okay. Have a great weekend, everybody. See you next week.